Dignity during dependence. The government releases details of its proposed fee structure for aged care. Hello, I'm Pamela Medlen. This is ABC News. The Defence Minister strips Distinguished Service Medals from a number of officers over alleged war crimes in Afghanistan. Overdevelopment on the agenda, politicians propose a temporary ban on new tourism builds in Bali. And the pilot program helping Andy Cooper achieve his dream of a career in coffee. Many Australians will have to pay thousands more for aged care from July next year, with sweeping changes set to pass Parliament. The federal government and opposition finally reached a deal today aimed at making the system more sustainable, affecting those going into aged care facilities or accessing care at home. Political reporter Evelyn Manfield explains.
After months of negotiations,
we're announcing the greatest improvement in aged care in 30 years.
Those already in the system won't have to pay more, but new entrants will face changes from next July. For example, a fully supported pensioner with few assets would pay up to $300 more. A part pensioner who owns a home up to $4,700 more, while a self-funded retiree could be hit with an extra $13,400 more a year.
Those with means did say they were happy to pay more as long as they could see it was delivering quality services, that there was transparency about where the money was going, and that the provider would uphold their rights.
At the moment, we're not building anywhere near the new beds we need. We're closing more than we open, and we're not able to refurbish them.
The amount someone spends across their lifetime will be raised too. For non-clinical care, the cap will lift from about $80,000 to $130,000.
The government has agreed to these caps that we've forced them into accepting.
The proposal, which still needs to pass Parliament, will also see a new support at home program.
We are re-gearing the entire system of aged care in this country to be about supporting you at home.
The government had promised criminal penalties for providers that allowed or covered up repeated abuse and neglect. But the opposition feared that would spark an exodus, and ultimately Labor wanted bipartisan support. Instead, it's promising civil penalties for providers that breach standards. Yvonne Buter's mother died in aged care after falling out of bed numerous times. Months later, she lost her father after a wound wasn't treated properly.
That people aren't harmed in aged care, that would be the priority. But then if they are, that there are consequences.
Aged care that's safe and sustainable, a major challenge with the number of Australians over 85 set to triple in a generation. Evelyn Manfield, ABC News, Canberra.
A small group of army officers will have their Afghanistan service decorations removed for failing to prevent alleged war crimes during their command. The Defence Minister's long-awaited decision has sparked anger across the veterans community as authorities continue to gather evidence for possible prosecutions. Here's Defence correspondent Andrew Green.
Government response to the Brereton report? I haven't seen it. Haven't seen it at all?
An international army conference in Melbourne.
We recognise the timeless challenges of land warfare.
Is overshadowed by a long-awaited announcement in Parliament.
This will always be a matter of national shame.
The Defence Minister confirming Distinguished Service Medals will be stripped from some current and former commanders who failed to prevent alleged war crimes in Afghanistan.
Combat has shown that our soldiers are capable of great courage and bravery under fire. It has also shown that we can do great wrong on the battlefield.
The decision coming almost 4 years after damning findings of the Brereton report into the conduct of Australian Special Forces soldiers during the war against the Taliban, and just days after the release of the Veteran Suicide Royal Commission.
How insensitive, how bloody insensitive to do this.
The identities of officers being punished are being withheld on privacy grounds, but former Defence Chief Angus Campbell, who first recommended removing medals, will be keeping his own.
It's a small number of people that we are talking about.
His actions today, in effect, spit at the feet
of those brave young Australians, the 26,000 of them who went to Afghanistan over 2 decades and put their lives on the line.
That anger is shared widely across Army ranks as, behind the scenes, investigators continue to gather evidence for possible prosecutions, a process the government says could take up to a decade.
The long shadow of Afghanistan will continue to shape the context for our Army for some years to come.
Australia's longest war still has chapters to be written. Andrew Green, ABC News, Melbourne.
Digital giants could be fined for allowing harmful misinformation to remain online under new powers to be given to the National Communications Regulator. The federal government says its updated misinformation and disinformation bill will force platforms such as Facebook and Google to adhere to their own codes of conduct around removing false content. Labor's draft misinformation laws attracted almost 3,000 public submissions, many of which were worried about an attack on free speech and an exemption for political content. Political material will now be included under the laws. If passed, the government says its bill won't impinge on free speech.
We are setting a very high threshold for what kind of information online constitutes mis or disinformation. And this needs to be content that is seriously harmful and also basically verifiably false.
WA Labor MP has raised concerns about a concerted effort by interest groups to influence state and federal environmental protection laws. Speaking about the state government's overhaul of Western Australia's environmental approval system, retiring MP Chris Talentire described the changes as a wish list from industry groups.
Breaking ranks.
I want to express some concerns about the general climate around consideration of environmental protection in Western Australia.
Foot out the door, Labor backbencher Chris Talentire reveals he's out of step with the state government on its signature environmental approvals policy.
There is a concerted effort by interest groups to counter the environmental protection laws that exist at a state and federal level.
Mr Talentire ultimately said he would support the government's Environmental Protection Amendment Bill, which has drawn criticism from conservationists while being welcomed by industry. But he raised several concerns, including removing the right to appeal an EPA decision.
That appeal process is so important and we should respect it and treasure it.
We have industry making their views known, Chris making his view known, conservationists making their view known. My job is to strike the balance that gets it right.
Aimed at cutting green tape and speeding up approvals, the government says it's the most significant overhaul of WA's environmental approval laws in a generation. Rhiannon Shine, ABC News.
A Broome man who cable-tied the wrists of 3 children in WA's north in March has faced trial in Broome. The man's lawyer argued that what he described as a citizen's arrest was reasonable and necessary.
It was a scene in a remote town that shocked the nation. Now the man who restrained them, Matej Radulich, has faced trial in Broome on 3 counts of aggravated common assault. While both prosecution and defence agreed the children were cable-tied on his property, the point of contention was whether the act was reasonable and necessary. The court heard audio from Mr Radulich's 000 call shortly after finding the children in the pool and restraining them. His lawyer, Seamus Rafferty, said it took officers 37 minutes to attend the scene. When cross-examined, the investigating officer from the incident confirmed he believed a lawful citizen's arrest was carried out. Police prosecutor Michal Gregg argued Mr Radulich had other options and the dehumanising effect of using cable ties on the children made the force unreasonable. In his closing argument, Mr Rafferty argued the case was not about optics, emotion, race or vigilantism and reiterated his client's use of a citizen's arrest was lawful. Magistrate Dean Potter reserved his decision on the matter until October and granted Mr Radulich bail until his next hearing. Maya Kordick, ABC News, Broome.
Police have found the body of a missing man who disappeared in WA's southwest. 66-year-old Frank Nelson was last seen leaving his campsite in Nangabrook near Dwellingup on Saturday morning. His empty canoe and paddle were found floating in the Murray River shortly after. An extensive search was launched and his body was found near Bob's Crossing late yesterday. His death is not being treated as suspicious. The boss of Channel 9 says he will leave the network at the end of the month. Mike Sneesby's tenure as CEO has been marred by a sinking share price, job cuts and serious allegations against former executives.
Mike Sneesby was criticised for carrying the Olympic torch in Paris as the network's journalists were preparing to strike. Now the chief executive has announced that he is standing down in just a few weeks.
Whether he jumped or whether he was pushed, it's a great move for Nine.
Mike Sneesby told staff that this year has been one of the most challenging in my career, where our resilience has been tested. There has been protests over pay, no job losses, 200 job cuts, falling ad revenue and the exit of Peter Costello as chairman after this moment. Nine's culture is also under scrutiny after serious, inappropriate behaviour allegations were levelled against its news boss. Darren Wick has since left, reportedly with a big payout. Rival Network 7 is also battling sexual harassment allegations.
There's no question there has been a culture, particularly in commercial television, of sexual harassment and sexism.
A report into Nine's culture is expected for October. Mike Sneesby is stepping down on September 30, meaning he won't be in the top job when this long-awaited report is released.
We know it's a pretty deep and extensive review of behaviours of not just management but colleagues across the company.
Nine will be run by its chief financial officer while a successor is found. Matt Stanton has already had a tough year, with Nine stock down 40% this year alone.
It's been a tough time for Channel 9, but it's been a tough time for all commercial television and media.
Nine's board and management declined interviews. Amelia Turzon, ABC News.
An Israeli airstrike on a school-turned-aid facility in central Gaza has killed at least 18 people, including 6 UN employees. It's the highest death toll amongst UNRWA staff in a single incident. The UN Secretary-General says what's happening in Gaza is totally unacceptable. And a warning, this report contains images and details viewers may find distressing.
For the 5th time, a UN school turned shelter in the Nuseirat refugee camp is hit by Israeli airstrikes. A man collects body parts in a plastic bag as he inspects the destruction.
My children are still missing. 4 of my children. I do not know where my daughters are. Where is my wife?
Nearby, first responders try to retrieve the bodies of the Eid family so they can be buried.
The house of our neighbours, the Eid family, was targeted. There were about 7 martyrs, 4 children, 2 women and a young man.
The Nuseirat shelter in central Gaza is one of many run by the UN Palestinian Refugee Agency, or UNRWA. It's home to around 12,000 displaced people. UNRWA says 6 of its workers were killed in the strike.
This was the single deadliest day for our agency in the 75-year history. But all told, we've lost 220 of our colleagues to date to this conflict.
The Israeli military says it was targeting Hamas militants planning attacks from inside the school.
We must condemn firmly what was the horrible terror attacks that Hamas has produced. But then afterwards, we have witnessed a series of military interventions by Israel in Gaza with a level of death and destruction that has no parallel in my time as Secretary General.
Gaza's health ministry says more than 41,000 Palestinians have been killed in Gaza since the war began. Chelsea Edwards, ABC News.
On a joint visit to Ukraine, top diplomats from the United States and Britain have pledged additional aid, but are yet to greenlight deeper strikes into Russia. Kyiv has been pleading with its allies for months to let Ukraine fire Western missiles deep into Russian territory at what's a critical juncture in the war.
Travelling in tandem, America's top diplomat and his British counterpart arrived in Ukraine, a united front.
The United States, the United Kingdom, united for Ukraine.
As the pair met with dignitaries outside a ballistic missile attack set off air raid alarms. A reminder of the constant threat to life in Ukraine. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and his newly appointed foreign minister urged the two leaders to lift limits on the use of long-range missiles provided by the West.
To defend our people, brave steps from all our partners are necessary.
Kyiv has repeatedly been denied permission to use the weapons to strike deep into Russian territory over concerns it could escalate the conflict. US President Joe Biden has indicated that position may soon change, but not yet. Instead, the US and UK have promised more than $2 billion in additional funds for humanitarian aid and to repair damaged energy infrastructure.
We are having discussions on a range of issues, including the military equipment that Ukraine needs to win.
We want Ukraine to win, and we're fully committed to keep marshalling the support that it needs.
The foreign leaders will now report back to London and Washington before the US President and British Prime Minister meet for talks on Friday. Moscow has vouched to destroy any US missiles sent to Ukraine as Russia's troops continue to make gains in the country's east. Michelle Rimmer, ABC News, London.
As voters in Indonesia prepare for regional elections, overdevelopment will be high on the agenda in Bali. Politicians are proposing a temporary ban on new tourism builds as the island grapples with a growing influx of so-called digital nomads and foreign property investors.
It's been voted one of the most beautiful beaches in the world, but Bali's Kelingking Beach is about to undergo a controversial transformation. The local village authorities have brought in a Chinese company to build a 182-metre high elevator and viewing platform.
Once it's built, would you ride on the glass elevator?
No, never.
Never?
Never.
That's how strongly you feel about it?
Never. Never.
Senator and activist Nilu Jelantik is part of a growing pushback in Bali against what she sees as excessive development. And it's Bali's famous rice terraces where the biggest changes are happening.
Farmers are giving up growing rice, very little income, and sell the land, tons of money.
There's a villa boom taking place, partly fueled by foreign investors. Conservationists worry that serene inland areas like Ubud might go the way of coastal hotspots like Canggu, where mega clubs and apartment blocks compete for space.
You have a lot of celebrities coming to Bali. It's like the Asian Ibiza at the moment, so people love it.
Sales rep Arthur Richard is from a Ukrainian-owned developer. He says they're employing 900 people and helping Bali's economy. It's a tricky issue for the island's politicians to deal with, given visitors drive up to 80% of Bali's economy.
I think it comes back to if there are people who want to come to Bali, we're not going to reject them, as long as visitors who come follow the rules of Indonesia.
Development will be in focus as Bali's voters choose a new governor in November. Leaders who'll be tasked with trying to preserve the culture and environment of an island that so many people want a piece of. Bill Birtles, ABC News, Bali.
A coffee van owner in Perth's north is training up his newest recruit on how to make the perfect brew. Teaching the budding barista has become the highlight of his week, and he's urging more businesses to open their minds to the possibility of employing people with disabilities.
Dave Macquarie can spot a budding barista a mile away.
How you going, Andy?
Yeah.
You ready for today?
So when he noticed Andy Cooper watching him make coffee from his van in Eglinton, he made his move.
When Andy comes on a Wednesday for me, I feel like I'm just helping him and it makes me feel better, right? I'm giving him, you know, him being around me gives me a bit of happiness.
The 37-year-old has Down syndrome and recently got his basic level barista certificate, dreaming of making coffees in real life one day. But he wasn't able to find a business in Perth's north to take him on until he met Dave, who's training him up an hour a week, building up to more.
It's so nice to come and go sometimes and make it more people be happier.
Andy's carer has noticed a big change in his confidence and people skills since he started the training. The state government has just launched a pilot program that aims to give people with disability more opportunity by identifying skill gaps and providing specialised support to ensure a smooth transition into the workforce. The 12-month program, Ability Link, will work with businesses like Dave's that are wanting to provide ongoing work for people with disabilities and helping them find a suitable match.
Particularly understanding what a person's aspirations are, what their abilities are, what contribution they can make, and being open to making the changes in the business that might accommodate those differences.
If we look back over history, the percentages of people with disability who are seeking employment but are unable to do it hasn't changed. So there needs to be that genuine commitment and champions in government and the business sector to bring about some meaningful change.
How many sugars you want? One?
Back in the van, Dave plans to put Andy on the books when he's ready, enjoying the sampling while they're at it. Courtney Withers, ABC News.
The largest exhibition of First Nations art displayed in Canberra will open to the public this weekend. Ever Present pays tribute to the existence and persistence of the world's oldest living culture through a diverse array of works.
A celebration of culture, country, ceremony and community. More than 260 works spanning well over a century.
We challenge these notions of what is Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander art, that it isn't just the dots that people may be familiar with from Central Australia.
Ever Present has been touring since 2021, travelling to Perth, Singapore and Auckland before arriving at the National Gallery.
A lot of the larger works couldn't travel overseas, but we're able to showcase them here today, which is wonderful.
Colonialism and resistance are key themes, with works from the likes of Vincent Namatjira and Richard Bell.
Truth-telling is a really important part of the healing in this country.
The exhibition also puts emerging artists in the spotlight. Billy Bayan created this work in his parents' basement during the pandemic. He never expected it to end up on the national stage.
Career-wise, this is quite easily the biggest moment for me. You know, just seeing the work like alongside all of your heroes and favourite artists, yeah, it's kind of weird and mind-blowing.
The exhibition includes a number of new acquisitions too, including this wearable art on display at the gallery for the first time. The collection is ever expanding. The exhibition runs until August next year, leaving plenty of time to soak in the sights. Lily Nothling, ABC News, Canberra.
To finance now, and both the local share market and Aussie dollar rose today after a fall in US inflation. Here's Alan Kohler.
Inflation in America isn't quite back to the 2% that the Federal Reserve would like it to be, but it's close and getting there. Headline inflation is down to 2.5%, and core inflation, where they take out food and energy, was steady at 3.2%. A US rate cut, though, seems locked in for next week, but it probably won't be the big one. It'll just be the usual 0.25%. And the only problem America still has with inflation is housing. This chart shows core inflation with and without housing. So what they call shelter inflation, mainly rent, is still above 5%. But the decline in headline CPI was well received by the markets, and the S&P 500 rose 1%, the Nasdaq 2%, and the Nikkei in Japan 3.5%. One negative on the US market last night was Trump Media and Technology Group, the company controlled by the former president that owns his social media thing called Truth Social. It's seen as a way to bet on whether he'll win the election, because if he does, his company will probably make a lot of money. And, well, the price slumped after the debate and Taylor Swift's endorsement of Pamela Harris. Investors couldn't decide which of those was worse for the Republican candidate. The Australian market zipped up 1% with solid gains by banks and miners. 9 entertainment shares fell quite a lot following the resignation of CEO Mike Sneesby, but That's not very unusual for this stock, especially in the 3.5 years since Mr Sneesby took over in April 2021, since when it has fallen 58%. And that's not normally the thing that encourages CEO longevity. On commodity markets, iron ore and oil and copper went up, gold fell, and the Australian dollar went up because the US dollar fell. And that's finance.
Sport, and the teams are in for the weekend of AFL finals, with Port Adelaide's Charlie Dixon holding on to his spot and Todd Marshall recalled after playing just one game in 8 weeks. For the Hawks, no late surprises, confirming just one change to their team last night ahead of a big semi-final at the Adelaide Oval tomorrow.
The Premiership Cup was in safe hands as it continued its tour around the country, and one of Hawthorn's most decorated players is backing his former club's chances this weekend.
They're in good form, they're young, they're not afraid, they're going to take the game on.
The team got its first look at Adelaide Oval this afternoon as Jai Sarong was given the nod to replace the injured Sam Frost in the backline. Ken Hinkley was in a daring mood this morning, unconcerned about whether the Hawks would target midfielder Zach Butters' sore ribs tomorrow night.
I say go for it. Zach's a tough player, really tough player. He won't take a step backwards.
The pressure is mounting on the power coach after last week's heavy defeat and a mixed finals record. Whatever happens this weekend, Hinkley says his job is assured.
I'm not going to be a smart ass here in any way, shape or form, but I'm contracted.
The Giants captain has been given his assignment, likely to go up against Brisbane's Brandon Starcevic and needing to lift after a quiet game against Sydney.
He's one of the best players in the competition. We expect him to work his way through any matchup that he gets.
And the Lions remain optimistic backman Jack Payne will overcome a knee injury in time for the match on Saturday as they fight for a place in a preliminary final.
We're just going to continue to play aggressively, take the game on, put our best foot forward and see what happens.
Erin Marsicovetere, ABC News.
West Coast has bounced back from its loss to Essendon, beating the Western Bulldogs 32-21 in their AFLW clash at Whitten Oval. The Bulldogs made a fast start on their return to their home ground, booting the first 2 goals of the match. West Coast slowly worked its way into the game to hit the front midway through the second term. Ella Roberts kicked a great goal on the run to give the Eagles a 10-point lead at the final change. Ellie Blackburn gave the Bulldogs a sniff early in the fourth, but West Coast controlled the closing stages, holding on to leave the Bulldogs winless after 3 games. Incoming WA Cricket CEO John Stevenson says he's very aware of the big shoes he's filling in taking over from Christina Matthews at the WACA. Stevenson is in Perth for a week before formally starting in November and is inheriting an organisation enjoying unprecedented success on the field. The Englishman played 1 test against Australia at the Oval in 1989 and was CEO of Essex in England's county cricket for competition for 3 years. Stevenson says building on Matthews' legacy is important.
I'm well aware of starting at a time where WA cricket is in such good shape on the field and off the field. So I just want to make sure we sustain that success, and that will be really my focus. She left a great legacy and I want to continue that.
It was shorts and T-shirt weather in the city today, and we've got more of that to look forward to. Right now in town it's 26 degrees and humidity's 31%. Perth's minimum was 12.1 degrees around 6:30 this morning, rising to a top of 26.9 around 2:30 this afternoon. Much colder out at Ayr in the southeast of the state. It dropped to -1 overnight and it's back into the 40s in the north. Derby, Fitzroy Crossing and the Curtin Air Base all reached 40 today. To the satellite, there's some cloud over the interior and north generating patchy rain, and it's been pretty clear elsewhere. There's a slow-moving high-pressure system across the Bight which will direct east to southeast winds across the northern and central parts of WA. A low-pressure trough near the west coast will persist into the weekend. Around the country, partly cloudy in Sydney and Adelaide, showers developing in Melbourne, a shower or 2 for Hobart, morning frost then sunny in Canberra and mostly sunny and 36 in Darwin. Back to WA, in the north, a slight chance of a shower in the northern Kimberley with temperatures getting up to 40 degrees again, mostly sunny in the Pilbara and interior. Windy at times but sunny through the Gascoyne, Goldfields and Central West. Warmer temperatures near the coast. The chance of morning fog over the southwest of the state, cool overnight temperatures through the great southern and south coastal areas, reaching the low to mid-20s during the day. And it's even warmer in Perth tomorrow, a sunny day with a top of 28 after an overnight low of 14. That's real spring weather for you. Sunrise will be at 18 past 6, setting at 6:07, and it's sunshine as far as the forecast can see. 27 on Saturday, slowly getting cooler, maybe some cloud about next Wednesday, down to 20 degrees by Thursday. And that's ABC News for now. Brianna Shepherd will be with you tomorrow. In the meantime, you can stay up to date with ABC News online or catch the news anytime on ABC iView.